You have probably had this happen before. You walk into a room, hear a sentence, see a face turn toward you, and suddenly your whole body tells you the same thing at once. This has happened. Not something like it, not something close to it. This exact moment, every angle, every sound, every second, and yet at the very same time, you know that cannot possibly be true. That eerie split, the feeling of certainty colliding with the knowledge that the certainty is false, is déjà vu. And if you have felt it, you are in very crowded company. Most healthy people seem to experience it at least once in life, and for many, it happens more than once. Most people assume the answer is simple. Your brain glitched, your senses lagged. Reality stuttered for half a second and made the present feel like the past. But that is not quite right, because déjà vu is not just familiarity. If it were, you would simply think, oh yes, I remember this, and you do not. The strange part is that the feeling arrives without the memory that should explain it. Something inside you says known, while something else says impossible. And modern researchers increasingly think that this contradiction is not a bug around the edges of memory. It is the experience itself. Déjà vu may be what it feels like when familiarity appears without a source, and your brain notices the mismatch in real time. The phenomenon has fascinated people for more than a century. In the late 19th century, the French philosopher Émile Boirac gave it the name déjà vu, meaning already seen. Long before neuroscience had brain scans or laboratory memory paradigms, people already understood the core oddity. Somehow the mind can produce the conviction of prior experience without any recoverable past to attach it to. That is why the experience has always attracted supernatural interpretations, past lives, premonitions, hidden timelines, a secret repetition in reality. But science has pulled the mystery somewhere both less magical and, honestly, more unsettling. The strongest explanations do not say you are seeing the future. They say your memory system can manufacture the feeling of the past without giving you the past itself. To understand why that can happen, you have to separate two things. People usually treat as one. Memory is not a single beam of light. It has components. One part is recollection, the ability to pull up context to say where you know something from. The other is familiarity, a vaguer signal, more like a feeling than a replay, a sense that something has been encountered before even when you cannot identify the source. That distinction matters because familiarity can exist on its own. You can feel that a face, a name, a place, or a pattern is known without being able to say why. Déjà vu, according to one influential line of research, may be exactly that kind of familiarity-based recognition happening in ordinary life. This is one reason déjà vu feels so slippery. Researcher Anne Cleary has argued that it resembles what psychologists call recognition without identification. In laboratory work, people can be nudged into a feeling of knowing even when they cannot identify what they are supposedly recognizing. In older experiments, for example, prior exposure to certain names could later bias people toward feeling those names were significant or famous, even when they could not consciously retrieve the source of the familiarity. The important point is not the trivia. It is the mechanism. Your mind can generate the feeling of, I know this, before it can answer the question, from where? That means the sensation at the heart of déjà vu is not only possible. It is a general feature of how memory works. Cleary and others pushed that idea further with a stranger possibility. What if the trigger for déjà vu is not a hidden memory of the whole event, but a hidden resemblance between the present moment and something from your past? Not the same place, not the same conversation, not the same people, but the same structure, the same spatial layout, the same arrangement of parts, the same pattern under the surface. In experiments using scenes and virtual environments, participants were more likely to report déjà vu when a new situation shared a configuration with an earlier one they could not consciously recall. In other words, the room you are standing in may not be familiar because you have been there before. It may feel familiar because its deep pattern echoes another place your memory cannot quite bring to mind. That gives déjà vu its first eerie twist. The feeling may be real, while the explanation your conscious mind wants to assign to it is false. You are not remembering this moment. You may be reacting to a buried resemblance between now and then. And because the resemblance is incomplete or inaccessible, recollection never arrives to rescue the feeling. The result is that unnerving suspension, a moment that feels remembered but cannot be placed. If that is true, then déjà vu is not evidence that your life is repeating. It is evidence that your brain is constantly comparing the present to patterns left behind by the past, including patterns you can no longer consciously reach. But there is another reason the experience feels supernatural. Déjà vu often comes with the sense that you know what will happen next. The room feels familiar, the conversation feels familiar, and a small part of you starts whispering that the next second is familiar too. It can feel like prediction, like a preloaded future, but when researchers tested that experimentally, they found something cruelly elegant. Déjà vu did increase people's feeling that they knew what was coming next. It did not give them above-chance predictive power. The premonition was itself part of the illusion. The state did not make people better at forecasting the next turn. It made them feel more confident that they could. That matters because it shows déjà vu is not only a memory illusion. It is also a metacognitive illusion. It changes how you judge your own mind. And this is where the newer conflict account becomes especially compelling. According to recent reviews, déjà vu can be understood as the clash between two simultaneous evaluations. One system says familiar, another says novel. You are not simply dragged into false familiarity. You are also aware, at least dimly, that the familiarity is inappropriate. That is why normal déjà vu is so brief and so weird. If the false familiarity won completely, you might mistake the entire moment for a literal memory. But in ordinary déjà vu, something in your cognitive control system pushes back. You feel the contradiction instead of fully believing it. This brings us to the work of neuroscientist Akira O'Connor and colleagues. In healthy people, they argued that déjà vu seems to reflect a mismatch between errant memory signaling and memory monitoring processes. That is a dry scientific phrase for a very intimate event. A familiarity signal appears. Then the mind's reality-checking machinery notices that the signal does not fit the available evidence. In laboratory analogs of déjà vu, researchers use false memory procedures that created familiarity, while also giving participants reasons to know that the familiarity should be wrong. Under those conditions, people reported déjà vu-like states. The idea is astonishingly simple. The experience may emerge not when memory fails silently, but when the brain catches its own false alarm. Brain imaging adds another layer. In one fMRI study built around a laboratory analog of déjà vu, researchers identified activity in regions associated with conflict processing when participants reported the state. That fits the broader picture. Déjà vu may involve memory systems that generate a feeling of familiarity, along with frontal systems that monitor conflict and detect that something is off. So the sensation is not just, I have lived this before. It is closer to, part of my brain is flagging this as known, and another part is warning me that the flag does not make sense. The creepiness is the conscious taste of that internal argument. This may also help explain one of the strangest facts about déjà vu. In healthy people, it tends to be more common when people are younger and then decline with age. Older reviews reported that frequency drops across the lifespan, and newer reviews echo the same broad pattern. If ordinary déjà vu depends partly on the interaction between familiarity signals and conflict monitoring, then it makes sense that changes in memory and cognitive control systems across age would alter how often the state appears. The exact reason is still debated, but the broad pattern suggests that déjà vu is not some spiritual message reserved for special moments. It is tied to ordinary features of a working human brain. There is one important complication. Not all déjà vu is the same. A large recent review found meaningful differences between non-ictal déjà vu in healthy people and ictal déjà vu associated with epilepsy. In ordinary life, déjà vu is usually brief, infrequent, and not particularly alarming. In seizure contexts, it can be more intense, more negative, and part of a wider pattern of neurological symptoms. Medical sources note that feelings of déjà vu can occur as an aura in temporal lobe seizures. So the experience is usually harmless, but when it becomes frequent, unusually intense, or arrives with other strange symptoms, it stops being just a curiosity and becomes something worth clinical attention. So what is déjà vu, really? It is not proof that you are remembering the future. It is not evidence that your life has slipped into a loop. It is not your soul recognizing a scene from another timeline. It is something both more ordinary and more profound. It is what it feels like when your brain generates familiarity without explanation, then catches the error before you turn it into a belief. A false memory signal rises. A monitoring system objects. And for 1 second, you become conscious of the argument. That is why the moment feels split in half. One side says, I know this. The other says, I can't. And maybe that is the strangest part of all. Déjà vu does not show that your memory is weak. It shows how aggressively your mind is trying to protect reality. All day long, without your permission, your brain is comparing patterns, testing familiarity, checking context, and asking whether the present belongs to the past. Most of that work remains invisible. Déjà vu is one of the rare moments when the machinery shows through. For an instant, you can feel the mind reaching for an explanation, finding only resemblance, and then pulling itself back from believing a lie. The eerie sensation is not reality repeating. It is your brain refusing to let a false recognition become a false memory.